definitely your passion. Like, it was kind of like dripping off the screen.
I was so stoked that someone was reaching out to me. Somebody like you was saying, hey, come be a part of this team, come do modeling or art. I was just so happy to do it.
It's just crazy how long ago this journey began.
In this space, something like that type of story is very unique.
I had an idea. I had inspiration. I had a script. I had a bit of money stashed away. I had tons of talented people involved, but I couldn't organise them. So Shades of Red initially was conceived around 2014, but I guess the genesis of those ideas in the story were being developed much earlier. So when I was at university, I studied a Bachelor of Creative Industries, and primarily I was focused on units which allowed me to pursue directing and script writing, because those were the two elements that I appreciated the most, especially the idea that you would write a story and as a director you would be able to visually communicate that story in a film. So having the opportunity to pursue both of those things in university really gave me a launching pad that led me towards Shades of Red. And I think without those university projects to give me the inspiration and give me the sense of being able to achieve these kind of ambitious ideas, without that I wouldn't have been able to pursue the project. And I'm just glad that I did get the chance to.
We haven't spoken for 16 months. No letters, no emails, no phone calls, nothing. And you've just come back here to apologise?
Reunion was the first year project that I wrote and directed. We did it on a soundstage as a single long take, and it was about a woman's reaction when a man that she knew comes back into her life unannounced after a year and a half. It was dealing with dysfunctional relationships and the fallout of having no honest and open communication between them. My second year project was actually based on a long-winded poem that I wrote about the connection between humans and nature. It was a lot darker and more cynical, a bit of a byproduct of my own feelings at the time, dealing with themes of alienation and disconnection from society, and the resulting retreat into nature and being at the mercy of its indifference. There was no dialogue, so it ended up being more like a 50-minute music video.
You'd come home late and the two of you would keep talking about it. You were so proud.
My third university project was a visual thesis using camera work and performance in opposition. I wanted to put a human character in front of an objectifying camera in order to demonstrate how it undermines the actor on display and, by extension, implicates the audience behind the camera. I was very invested in challenging the audience creatively by this point. Challenging material for me was all about opening discussion to hopefully make some kind of change happen in the audience.
It's my life and I don't care what you fucking think because it's none of your fucking business!
A short film after university that I'm fond of, which didn't ultimately get completed, was Sisters. It was the story of three sisters of various ages trying to navigate a life with dysfunctional and absent parents, and with each other. Again, dysfunction was something I was keenly focused on, and this definitely informed Shades of Red more and more as development went on. I think inspiration comes from acknowledging problems. For me, that usually starts with social issues. But creatively, I don't think that it's enough to simply point at a problem and say, this is happening, what can we do about it? Through both my childhood and my adulthood, I knew many people that had been through many traumatic situations and experiences in their lives. I had a lot more online connections than offline, and I ended up being a confidant to a lot of people's personal stories. I just tried my best to listen to them and support them, and I think that knowing what I knew, it kept me humble about my own experiences by knowing how much trauma that people I knew had to endure. But the stories that stayed with me the most were the ones from the people that didn't speak them openly. There were many people like that who didn't feel comfortable or safe to speak about what had been going on in their lives. I remember one person in particular who told me about the night terrors and seeing silhouettes in doorways that would walk towards her while she was paralysed and unable to move. And in spite of me knowing that, I never knew what caused it. It was something that she refused to speak openly about. And that really resonated with me, that for her there wasn't a safe place, a sense of being comfortable enough to reach out to another person and tell them what was going on, seek some kind of help. And that, in essence, was the core experience that I was using when it came to developing Shades of Red as a project. This idea of what is the process that leads us towards confronting our traumas. I think that it's important to kind of dig into how deeply rooted a issue in society is and how multifaceted that it can be. And it's important creatively to address those kind of difficult issues that are hard to talk about and have lots of different angles to explore. I felt that it needed to incorporate many stories from many different people, and in that sense be a much more authentic representation of the experiences of survivors of trauma in whatever form that it happened to take. I don't think there was ever a commercial motive in mind. It certainly wasn't something that I could look at and think, this is something that a broad audience would want to consume. But the reasoning behind that was that from the very beginning, I'd come in with a philosophy of, if it can make a positive difference to at least one person in the world, then all of the long-winded development and struggle would have been worth it. Choosing to create the film as an animation was several steps outside my comfort zone. I didn't personally have any prior animation experience, but the community of Source Filmmaker already had many existing projects by 2014 that demonstrated that there was huge potential for dramatic storytelling. Animation also bypassed great financial barriers of live action, such as cinematography and lighting setups. Finally, I felt that animation had a great strength in creating a personal connection to characters across cultural and language barriers, and I wanted to create a story which could reach beyond those limitations. But the animation wouldn't have been possible without the many extremely talented people who became involved.
My name is Caleb Dawson, or Pixel Online, and I help to work on 3D assets for environments in Shades of Red.
Good evening, I'm Ryan Foy, also known as Chill, and I was one of the mappers and asset creator on Shades of Red.
My name is Nilton Ameda, and I was the concept artist as well as the graffiti artist and ad artist for Shades of Red.
I'm Anonymous Gamer, and I worked on lighting and cinematography tests for Shades of Red.
Hi, my name is Bree. I was a 3D modeler and artist for the production team.
I'm Rex Camarillo, aka Citizen 5, and I was one of the principal animators on Shades of Red.
My name is Rin Araneta, and I am the voice of Callie, Emily's very party-going, manipulative, and two-faced friend.
Hello, my name is Saoirse Connolly, otherwise known as Oddsock's Tango, and I played the role of Ruth, Emily's mother.
Hello, I'm Allie Goodell, and I am the voice actor for Emily in Shades of Red.
The initial ambition of the project was quite limited. It was written as a 5-minute short that was telling an extremely compressed narrative.
So before I was brought on, this film was being produced as a Saxe Award submission. But it was ultimately decided that 5 minutes wasn't nearly enough to properly get its message across.
Because back in the day, that was all about that. It was the Saxe, the actual yeah, I'm gonna get a shiny weapon in a video game, yeah. That was the main attraction.
It was immediately apparent that it left very little room for nuance or contemplation, especially not for the themes that the project aimed to address.
So the scope was changed a few times. I was brought on with the prospect of helping out with a feature-length film that would have been over an hour in length.
Throughout 2014, I rewrote the screenplay 8 more times. After this, the depth and extent of the project became clear. Ultimately, it resulted in an 80-page script.
The plot of the film was always kept vague in our discussions, so as to not let any major plot details slip through.
That's quite remarkable that there weren't any leaks for that project.
I remember when I was actively working on the team, just seeing all the cool stuff that everybody was putting together. The other modelers, the animators. You know, being a part of that, I looked up to those people. And I think your project, it gave me a lot of inspiration to keep modeling. So honestly, I appreciate it. I was stoked to be a part of it. I still am.
You got a custom map, you got all the props, you got the voice acting, you got the animation, and it's just it was really cool to see because it was bespoke to that project.
I was captivated by the concept you were putting forward. This is crazy stuff, something you could submit to a film festival, not just the Saxes.
Leading so hardcore into just raw character drama. It was really refreshing to see, actually, and that got me of course that got me super interested. It's not one of those stories that's gonna go out of date either.
It's a lot more ambitious and deep than any other thing that anyone has ever made with Source Filmmaker,
And it also even showcases the versatility of the Source engine, right? Using Source Filmmaker to take all of this original content and tie it together to create something beautiful. I thought that was even cooler.
In the early stages of this project, it was very compelling for me to see all of the enthusiasm of everyone that was coming on board. And it really validated that I was making something that could be significant or make some kind of change or difference in the world. And it really pushed me to move forward with it, but I never really understood the logistics behind what I was getting myself into. Over the course of the project, I probably spent about $12,000. That included funding for an extensive Foley library. The mentioned rave soundtrack was commissioned specifically for the scene itself. There was also other independent pieces that were being worked on at this time. The texture artist Fee designed the textures to be original assets for the project itself. From the beginning, I wanted everything to be original, built from scratch. This would be its own world, far away from anything that already existed in Source Filmmaker. The scale of work that was required was huge, and it just kept on growing as time went on. At first, building a team was challenging, but soon we had material that started to show the scope of what we were trying to achieve. Emily was the heart and soul of the story, and the very first model that we created. As more assets were built, more people came on board, and development went into overdrive. The opening sequence was something I hoped would function as a montage of Emily's childhood, from her birth to late adolescence.
It would have been interesting to see the difference between the genuine smiles of Emily as a child and her playfulness as a kid in comparison to the kind of facade she tries to hold up for her mother, in how she tries to act like everything is fine.
When it comes to easing an audience into a story of this nature, I think it's really great to sort of have that moment of build up so that we have that foundation without dumping needless exposition into things.
Because I was adapting the stories of real people and their experiences, I knew that I didn't want to misrepresent what I had been told. So I knew that I had to have the insights of the people involved, and I didn't trust that my own individual view was going to be sufficient to properly represent those experiences on screen.
exploring these things with yourself and with Ali, especially, like when we'd had those three-way conversations and just talking about, brainstorming about what's next or how we should approach certain things. Even just being able to sit and share my own perspective and feel like that's being listened to and taken, not only seriously, but like really valued has been really, really, really positive for me.
In most projects that I've voiced for, I don't interact with the other voice actors, like, at all. It's just director sends me a script, I record it, and then I send it back, and I don't have any interaction with the other voice actors. So this one was really different, in which, like, you had us in calls, like, discussing the script, which I thought was an interesting dynamic.
In later drafts, I felt that giving Emily an early scene of emotional vulnerability was essential before she performs on stage. It tied into the overarching theme of masking and obscuring herself, and aligned with how isolated she felt, pretending her way through something people thought she was passionate about.
Even now, I don't really know what to feel, let alone what to say.
Her performance was written as a daughter confronting her mother over the neglect in the past and how it still affects her. There was a clear implication that Emily's mother had written it for her own catharsis. From the very beginning, Emily is not speaking her own voice.
She wanted her daughter to be perfect because, like, she never got to be, like, this person, and she was, like, projecting a lot. And so just seeing her, like, voicing the lines that Emily was voicing on stage just kind of really emphasized that just from the beginning scene.
Actually, it's really great visual storytelling. Like, it says a lot about the character straight off the bat. We know this character on the surface, at least. We know that the sort of like manager mom, the stage mom, living their dream through their kid kind of a thing. So I thought that was a really, really intelligent way to sort of give the audience a baseline for Ruth.
As you'll see in many sequences, we only got to the stage of building some of the frameworks of maps and layouts. Each rendition of the script had an impact on the development process, and this was a factor that delayed a lot of the project's workflow. It was in a constant flux of building a world from scratch, and it was a real creative challenge to make happen.
It speaks a lot to the dedication to get it right, but I think ultimately, I personally am grateful that you didn't feel the need to just rush and get it out. Like, I think that you taking your time and really considering everything, I think is really going to be a huge benefit to the project at the end of all of it.
The flurry of friends and relationships introduced in the lobby showed more of Emily's social introversion and the phrase in her support network.
I also like the idea of seeing all of these people swarming and milling about, almost like swaying Emily in certain directions instead of her making her own decisions. She's being pushed and pulled in certain directions to try and please other people.
Even her relationship with Ben, which was initially written as being more openly romantic, was changed to be a tentative situation, something Emily was unsure of, both due to her friends' and parents' judgment.
I definitely think that the introduction of Callie and Ben and Nick and all of that really serves to sort of juxtapose against Emily's actual personality and very much highlights how very opposite she is off stage from what we see in the opening monologue.
The strained relationship between her parents is already bubbling beneath the surface, and the upbeat and supportive mood quickly changes once her father's absence starts to be felt.
I think that a parent being that withdrawn is a different form of being trapped. You sense that lack of motivation, that lack of care. And in that sense, it nearly drains your own motivation. Emily would have greatly benefited from an advocate on her side that wouldn't be, talked down and who would show that sort of passion toward allowing her to be herself, and having that could have given her more strength to have a voice. But because there was none of that passion, subconsciously it would teach her, yeah, I care about you, but not enough to actually put in the effort. So why should you?
Seeing them argue in the car, specifically in that scene, everything feels so controlling, but also the father doesn't want to step up about the problems and try and fix them. It's like he retracts in a way.
At certain points, Emily's parents are so busy fighting about Emily with each other that they nearly forget she exists. And after a long time and after years of growing up like that, there is going to be a boiling point where a child will say, you know what? You're not paying attention to me anyway. You clearly have your own stuff to deal with. And I am stifled and smothered by these rules and by these expectations. Clearly, Emily feels unsupported in a myriad of ways.
I wanted to convey that Emily would often drift into escapism in order to get away from the family dysfunction in her life. The environmental design of the cityscape where they live was intentionally structured to be stifling and overwhelming. This sense of being unable to escape permeates the entire film. So thematically it felt that the environment had to convey that same sense of claustrophobia.
How can you be in love with somebody who's not maintaining the relationship? If somebody's gone all the time, he's gone a lot, it's really hard to have a connection with somebody like that and maintain that kind of love. And you grow apart and you become different people. And so maybe it started out with love, but now all that's really there is this like, okay, well, we have a kid together. We got to try and, do what we need to do for her. But ultimately, whatever was between them is long since, gone or at least in stasis. Because they're not those people anymore.
The conversation really shows a lack of care from her father, which I think was developed well throughout the entire script just because of his absence and his awkward distance whenever they would talk.
Listen, I don't want to force you to do anything. Your mother and I just have some disagreements about it. I spoke to some guys at work. They said they might have some entry-level roles to fill over the next few months. Just to keep your options open and all.
He never taught her any of these skills or anything that she might have needed for any career or ever asked her, what kind of thing she would want to pursue. So by offering this alternative of, hey, have you thought about getting a job? It's well, you didn't really set me up for any success there, so it's not really a good way out.
So then an incident like we see with Callie can arise, and when that happens, if a child has hit that limit, they are going to say, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take a chance because I'm sick of treading water. I'm sick of being forced into this box and trying to sort of keep myself afloat. So it's unsurprising to anyone, I would imagine, when Callie calls, that Emily is finally at that point where she says, you know what, I'm going.
But we all know psychologically that the environment around a main character obviously is going to influence how they act. You could sort of lead this back to the nature versus nurture argument, but I think that I worked on in these posters, I really wanted to depict some kind of play, some kind of downfall, right? And seeing Emily's story, there's a clear correlation that there was a really big turning point in her life that led her into a downward spiral.
It's sad, but also very understandable about how she fell into this trap, because her sense of self is very diminished by all of the pressure put on her by everyone else to do this and do that, and oh, we want you to be like this. Oh, you need to fit in, right? You want to make friends, right? So instead of taking the time to look inward and figure out what she really wants. She's instead influenced by these external forces, which makes her very easily impressionable and very vulnerable as a person.
I liked how Allie had this air of uncertainty to her character, like, and of course, introversion, you know. And as someone with the kind of drive that Callie has, like, it's like I had the power to steer where this was gonna go on, like, in my favor, or in her favor, in Callie's favor.
He's okay, I guess. But look at you. Why would you settle for okay? Just because he's the first guy who had the balls to start talking to you, like, kind of deep and all?
That was really fun. I really, really like sessions where me and other voice actors are just in and we do things live, you know?
It had always been difficult for Emily to fit everyone's expectations of her. She hoped Callie could be the one to lead her to some kind of self-discovery, but she just ended up in another place where she didn't belong. Beyond all of the glamour and style, it was a masquerade, playing pretend for strangers who didn't care for her, at least not for who she actually was. It was more judgment and alienation. She was always on the outskirts, having to prove herself to everyone.
So, is M your proper name, or?
It's just short for Emily. It caught on with my parents, so...
Oh, that's cool. So, what do you do, Em?
Well, I'm still in school.
She's a year behind us.
Oh, yes. You have a job then?
I'm looking.
She's a performer.
Oh, really? Done anything I would have seen?
I'm not that big yet.
Oh, maybe one day though, right?
She doesn't have any experience in what she wants to do. She doesn't even know what she wants to do. She hasn't established her sense of self, which makes it very hard to measure up to other people. So seeing all of these people with their accomplishments and how they boast of their successes, and then looking at oneself and being like, wow, I really haven't done anything. Like, I'm not all that impressive. I don't have much to show for myself. That can be a very isolating feeling.
Emily never got to understand where she belonged. Callie drags her into the politics of teenage friendship and tries to make her snub another friend at the mansion. When Emily tries being neutral, Callie quickly turns against her.
It's been a year. So much to show for yourself, Em. Little Alicia and that boyfriend. You're going to listen to me, aren't you? I put myself on the line bringing you here. No one else will take a chance on you.
You shouldn't have done it.
Did I make a mistake to tell them you wanted to make friends and chill out in places like this?
I'm not saying that.
You absolutely are. Are you gonna come? Or are you just going to stand there being a cunt?
I'll stay here.
Don't expect a welcome if you change your mind.
That was really when I got to portray the range that Callie had from being seemingly sweet and caring about Emily into just exposing her true colors of being manipulative and selfish. That was really fun. I think that was the most fun I had.
In terms of the artwork, I had to really sit down and think. Even for the paintings, right, the portraits, I actually referenced these figures of opulence, and I felt like it was important to show them in those portraits or you know, reference them through the looks of these characters. I really wanted to, when I was making these props, just show off that, wow, you know, the people who own this mansion are made of money. Even down to detailing the picture frames, going for that Baroque style. It's like, alright, how do I make something that has every single implication in the world, but at the same time doesn't? I knew it was going to be an imagined environment, so everything had to be, in a way, glamorous, Baroque, very old-fashioned. So what I did was, even to emphasize that sort of elegance, I pulled a lot of reference pictures of people doing ballet dances, and when I painted those references, it all, I don't want to say literally tied together, but it did, because it had those implications, but it also had the elegance that would be seen in an environment like in a mansion.
It would have been so good, like just a rave scene in particle effects. It sounds like fun, you know what I mean? That's a thing I kind of regret not, like, being better at when the time came.
The mansion was the major set piece of the film, an intoxicating and overwhelming environment where Emily finds herself stranded.
There's always that sort of discomfort and dysphoria of sort of being surrounded by this opulence that you're not used to, but then also to be in sort of the lion's den, surrounded by people that you thought were your friends, and now you're in the situation where you didn't even drive yourself, you depended on somebody else to take you. You're stuck in this party with people you thought were your friends, and suddenly they're turning vicious against you.
When you're going into a new environment and somebody's pushing you to go into this environment, you're vulnerable, and you listen to them because you feel like you can depend on them, or at least depend on them enough to maybe break free from them once you're in that environment and find yourself.
When she has that fallout with Callie, the person that sweeps in tries to appeal to her interests, tries to listen and engage with her on her level. There was this sense of predatory instinct, like they smelled the blood in the water and knew that she didn't belong there. She was unmasked and exposed and vulnerable.
Have you ever been here before? You want a bit of a tour? It's a pretty incredible place.
It felt to her like it was just a casual conversation in a public place, so she was happy to follow him along, because it seemed like he was respectful and acknowledged her for who she was. But that desire to belong, and to be heard, and to be acknowledged, punishes her.
I had to take a break for like a good half hour when I got to that scene. You know the one.
It's really important for me to, obviously, to fully stand behind what I do, and what I contribute to. And part of that for me was like, I need to be able to actually consume the content myself to understand what it is. And I found it actually pretty impossible to read the entirety of that scene. Like, I couldn't get through it.
I had to take a break, compose myself, and ask, what the hell did I sign up for, you know? Like, I understood from the get-go that you wanted to tackle some really serious stuff, but this is like completely new ground that you were treading for something made in good old source filmmaker, you know? Which it isn't unknown for people to use it for dramatic stuff, but this was something else.
I'm recording this several months after everything else, and it might come out as a bit of a mess, but I've decided not to show this particular scene. The scene itself was a sequence where Emily is trapped in a private room by two men who sexually assault her and then record the act to disguise it as being consensual. When I wrote the scene, it was a combination of being very angry about knowing all of the experiences of so many different people and really wanting to show how traumatic an experience Emily endures. And it was also out of fear that the other parts of the story that I was writing weren't going to be written effectively enough to make a difference. I felt that if I was to write this scene in this way, it was like a logical extension of the kind of mentality that I'd grown in my early projects of having an almost complete disrespect for the audience's sense of safety or comfort. Like I wanted to put them in the shoes of Emily as a victim of this violence and give them no easy escape. And the whole sequence was written in such a graphic detail, and it was essentially an endurance test. It was 7 pages of just terrible sexual violence.
So did I really want to contribute to a project that dealt in graphic sexual assault, let alone possibly carry the burden of animating that sort of thing myself? Well, when it was explained to me, the reasoning for having a scene like that in the film, and how the rest of the film would be all about the fallout of that rather than it just being a one-off thing, made me realize that you were at least trying to approach this sort of subject matter with a certain amount of respect, unlike a lot of other producers who would just throw in sexual assault into the story for cheap drama. So I did eventually come around to it.
I think that the only way that I can grow is to acknowledge that I was wrong to go this direction. And I'd never really realised until now how much anger I held on to when I was writing this story, and how strongly I defended keeping that sequence in there. It doesn't matter how serious or respectful towards the reality of that situation that I thought I was being, because essentially I wasn't acting in solidarity with actual survivors. I was re-victimizing them because I wanted people to know how horrible this is. And at the time I was writing it, I was so deeply frustrated that there was such a sense of inaction that we collectively, as a society, I felt we weren't doing enough to address it. We weren't being there to help survivors through navigating all of the trauma that they've gone through. And I fought so hard for it to be there that I alienated friends and connections that I had in the project, and people left because there was such a horrendous amount of violence in that didn't need to be there. I could have gone the route of not showing that violence, but I held on to it so stubbornly, and I wrote so much material for that sequence and to justify its inclusion. And essentially what I was doing was treating it like it was an intellectual exercise rather than a emotional journey of growth as a person. And I really wanted to force the audience to understand rather than treating it like like it was going to be a compassionate and open dialogue. And that is, I mean, now I realise that that is the approach that it really needed. It needed to be a safe place where an audience could have this conversation and show solidarity and be compassionate. And it doesn't matter if I thought that, you know, showing this violence was going to be the right thing. It would have overshadowed everything else.
I think for me as a survivor, for me the more important story, or the more important aspect of the story is what I should say, and the thing that I think will touch more people is that aftermath, is that sort of reality of how much somebody else's choice to take somebody else's agency permeates their entire life.
Her home life was polished and pristine and just very protective and secluded. I think it would be interesting to see her exposed to these more raw elements of urban society and seen as almost a nightmare because of how unfamiliar it is and how dark and deceiving things might appear.
In terms of experience, this was actually a chance for me to dive into graphic design and concept art. In fact, it was one of the Kickstarters to helping to build my portfolio.
It took a very long time that I didn't have to start with, and I had to remake it a few times, I believe, for it to really fit the vision. And each time I did a version, to make sure I'm not just making, like, running into the wall, I would send it to someone that would say, is it good, is it bad, what to change, and if I could continue. So I'm sure that I'm not just working for nothing. Like, if I make like a bit of the underpass and it's like, no, it's not going to be in frame, you shouldn't have made that, you know, it would be like an hour lost.
The development pipeline was full of delays like that. Whenever a map or a model or a piece of artwork or recording needed to be adjusted, it would pass through me to get the okay. Then everyone would need to be updated to the latest version. Because of this, if someone fell through the cracks, there would be huge compatibility issues down the pipeline.
It doesn't become apparent how much project management and structuring of the team and departments influences the actual final product until, like, you know, much later on.
If I got like a fully animated piece, I'm like, yes, this is great. I want to like this. Doing the animation in Source Filmmaker at least takes a lot longer than lighting a scene. So I could get something done quite fast, iterate on it, render it, and just kind of twiddle my thumbs. If there were more animators on board the project, that would be a little different.
You need to manage everyone, and then at the same time work as much as they do, you know? It's not like just you're the organizer, you do nothing else. You need to, like, get everything sorted.
When I was actually starting the facial animation, I was immediately hit by the fact that the shape keys were not that great. Redoing that would have thrown away all the work that Citizen had done already, because it wouldn't be compatible. It would have to be redone from scratch. You'd have to find someone. Either you bother the person that had already done it and tell them, do it this way, or find someone new that could have done it. And that would have been like a whole adventure.
It really gave me a deeper respect for producers. I was spending years of my life organising hundreds of pieces of material while trying to refine a story and then produce that story. The heightened terror of being lost in an unfamiliar place, combined with her trauma, sends Emily into deep panic. She wants nothing more than the familiarity of home and to forget what has happened.
It is a life-altering event from which there is no return. Like, you can heal from it, but you're still never going to be the person you would have been had that not happened to you. And there is some amount of mourning and grieving in the healing process of what was lost, and not only the physical sense or the autonomous sense, but in the lost possibility of what could have been, or how you could have been, or how life would have been better if this hadn't happened.
She tries to dispose of her torn dress and close out the outside world.
I think the decision that Emily makes after her attack it's sad, it's upsetting, and it's all too relatable. There's far too many instances of attacks, sexual and otherwise, that go unreported for various reasons. It makes a lot of sense that in her grief and her trauma and her shock, particularly because her parents are not wildly emotionally supportive.
The parents' reaction when she comes home, it's like it just reinforces to her in her mind that she is the one that has done something wrong, when in reality, she has not at all. This is not her fault whatsoever.
The most important aspect of that, and a huge part of what informs Emily in terms of how she deals with the trauma and aftermath of that, is the relationship with her parents, especially her mother. It informs everything about how she sees herself, how she holds herself, the things she values, and whether or not she feels safe enough to even talk about that.
A typical teenager sneaking out usually wouldn't be a huge issue. That's a pretty common thing among teenagers. But because of the way Emily has been coddled throughout her entire life, this is a huge thing for her that she has never done before. Something very out of line of what her parents are used to. So the fact that something goes wrong and she's unable to open up about this makes matters even worse.
What did your friends tell you? Things would be better out there? You could drink and play around with boys and do whatever you want? I'm not blaming them for thinking that. I know I used to think that. I saw Ruth as somebody who was trying so hard to prevent her daughter from living the way that she had, that she ended up overcorrecting. And I think that, especially as a parent, is really relatable. Because especially if you're a child of trauma, raising a child, your biggest fear is, I don't want to be like that person. They're not saying these things to help you. They do it for themselves.
With her mother addressing her friendships in this way, it further served to isolate Emily and try and draw her back into the nest of Ruth as a mother.
She spends a lot of time planning what Emily's going to do, to the point where she kind of overlooks what's happening currently. She's not as dialed in as she thinks she is. There's a lot about Ruth that resonated with me, and I could see in another universe how I might have been or become her had I made slightly different choices, or, focused on slightly different things.
Now that she's been isolated from her friends, she has no external support system. While, yes, her mother is there, her mother is very disconnected to what is happening. She is blinded by her own desires and what she wants to see reflected in her daughter. So she cannot be that emotional support system that Emily needs, at least in this moment.
Emily is wont to turn that inside, make it very internalized. And it puts her through an absolute battle internally. It really, really destroys her. And it's heartbreaking to see. And I know that in particular, there are so many people who can resonate with that message of that self-loathing and that instinct to blame yourself when horrible things happen. Unfortunately, the world is full of people who can relate to that.
Hey, Emily. Been trying to get you for a while. I really enjoyed our night together. The video and photos came out really nice. I'm sure Ben will like them too. I've got some copies for you to pass on. Let's catch up soon.
Before the blackmailer reached out to her, in a way, she could distance what happened to her. Like, oh, that was at the mansion. I am separated from that now because I am in this house, and so I am safe here.
That threat of people finding out just compounds it, makes it worse, and makes it a lot harder to talk about as well.
Why are you doing this?
I like your pain. I think you like it too. It shows in these photos. Maybe we can look through them together.
Please don't do this to me.
Let me in, and we can talk about it.
So she loses control over her body. And then after the fact, she loses control over the narrative. She doesn't even get to suffer in silence. She has to worry about her attackers telling people and slandering her. And her actions then are even more restricted and controlled by the person trying to fuck with her.
It showed that this was very real. Like, this person was watching her every move. The way he sent flowers to her told her that, oh, he knows where I live. He is watching me. He is waiting for me to come out of this house.
Ruth is working off of a sense of only partial information. And from her perspective, her child snuck out to a party, came home, has been acting really fucking strange, has got flowers from some guy. Clearly, she's just rebelling, and it's frustrating for her. And Ruth, in response, because she doesn't have a coping mechanism, she was never taught self-regulation or emotional regulation, she responds by being more heavy-handed with being frustrated and upset and maybe a little passive-aggressive.
Why did you lie to me?
What do you mean?
Don't play coy with me. I know what these boys do.
Mom, I don't know.
Oh my God, stop pretending. Stop lying to me. Just go.
From her perspective, she doesn't understand that something else has happened. And honestly, she probably expects that Emily would tell her, because I think at this point, Ruth doesn't realize how maladaptive their relationship is and how little of a voice Emily actually has.
Her whole life she has been trained to be agreeable, to be, yes, I will do this, yes, I will do this, and to not challenge anything she's being told. And so that doesn't set her up very well for combating this blackmailer at all in any sense, which makes it very understandable as to why she's so easily influenced by this person.
I felt that it was fitting that she still believed that her parents' love for her was real, and that was the one thing that gave her the autonomy to break away from her abuser's attempt at blackmail.
Say it properly.
I loved it inside me.
Good girl. Your little body belongs to me, doesn't it? Say it.
No. Even though she feels very suppressed in her own house, there is still that sense of love, that little silver lining that, yes, maybe they can help me.
The problems would be treated as more systemic than the struggles of one family. There was a lot of considerations early on about environmental storytelling. The broader world and culture around the characters had to tap into the same sense of losing autonomy and individuality.
The MBFA doubled down on their controversial decision to uphold the proposed policy to recriminalize abortions, saying it falls in line with the ethics the association aims to uphold. The advisory board issued a statement emphasizing that it was the right decision to make, and fitting the fundamental ideals of the nation.
The nightmares were physical manifestations of Emily's trauma. The lack of resolution or knowing about her abusers, or having the capacity to engage with what has happened to her, leads to them corrupting her sanctuary. She has nowhere to feel safe, no way to respond except with renewed fear every night that they come.
Give it the little push over the edge, and then all of the shit that was already a problem is magnified and highlighted, and it grows and grows and grows until it finally starts to crush Emily. think a lot of people don't realize the knock-on effect that an assault against somebody has. The knock-on effect it has on her schooling, her relationships, her family, her home life, her anything that she gets joy out of. It's all affected. And I think that's a really important thing to depict as well.
She comes to understand from her assault that she was objectified, seen only for sexual purposes, and she rejects this aspect of herself. She draws a distance between herself and sexuality through binding of her breasts and cutting of her hair.
You can have a similar motivation of trying to find control and have an opposite reaction where the victim can become hypersexualized, start engaging in risky sexual behavior and things like that in an attempt to reclaim some sense of control of like, yeah, I'm having sex now and I'm having it with whoever I want to have, as much as I want to have and whatever, but because it's my choice and I'm doing it and I have control over it and nobody's making me. That is another way of asserting their control over their bodily autonomy. There is no one size fits all for it. You're telling a story. One story of many, many different realities, all kind of running parallel to one another. All they have in common is this kid. The problem with that is that becomes their funnel for their grievances with one another. They use her as a tool against each other.
You have no belief in her. We go to the theater, I see her pour her heart out, and you sit on your fucking phone. You think our daughter goes sleeping with boys because her mother doesn't give her any time? I'm not the one making her into a head case. Can you just do your hair and maybe wear something a bit nicer? I think we both need this, Em.
When she's faced with resistance from Emily of not wanting to go out, she just further reinforces the idea that they need to leave the house.
The thing is, Ruth is not a bad person. Ruth is a loving person. She just doesn't know how to love in a way that is healthy for her child. And in trying so hard to do the right thing and be, opposite of what her mother was for her, and really guide her child, she ended up smothering her child and forcing her down a path her child didn't want to go in. She essentially stole her child's voice. I think she genuinely thought she had allowed space for Emily to have a voice and that, they just naturally agreed about everything without realizing that she was just assuming and shoving the assumptions and by doing that, it's a different way of silencing her daughter.
We only reached early development for the mall sequence, but the ideas we were working with were already at play.
I remember making the storefronts. That took some time. And again, I wished I was as experienced as I am today, back in the day, because they're alright, that they fit, but I could have done much better, in my opinion.
It was just stuff that I was used to seeing since I was a little girl.
And so seeing these sexualizations of the body, in a way, she almost sees herself reflected in it, because I can see her picturing herself coming home in her ripped up dress and seeing that image of herself in these advertisements and not wanting to experience them, wanting to look away, wanting to run.
That sort of realization kind of hits, and she has to adapt into the world that she lives in, while also resisting all the consumerism that's being thrown at her.
I felt like the juxtaposition from the stagnation in her home life showed another side to how distanced she had become from the world, and how it represented a more insidious threat through everything that was around her. It was all alienating. The upbeat music, the sexualized and irrelevant imagery, the colour and consumer culture. There is no simple solution for her in this outside world.
Through having control, she's able to protect and shelter and care for her child. So the loss of that feels like she doesn't know what to do with herself. She doesn't know how to help. This is all she knows how to do. So she freaks out.
And then Emily's boyfriend shows up, and one of her biggest fears comes true in that even though she's tried to speak with this blackmailer to try and stave him off from showing these pictures, he decided to share the photos anyway. And honestly, any regular person would break down over that. That would absolutely be the final straw for a lot of people. And her world comes spiraling, crashing down just from leaving this house, which tells her, I can't leave ever again. Because if I go out in public, I will be ridiculed. I will be judged. I will be exposed.
Fake it till we make it, you know? It's that whole mentality of the song and dance of the abused, of like, I'm fine, everything's fine, and if I say it enough times, it's gonna be true.
She doesn't know how to process this information, and she believes her parents won't know how to process it either, in a healthy way at least.
If they're not literate enough emotionally to realize that what they're doing is wrong in the first place, if they don't realize that they have, that their approach has been wrong the whole time, it's all they really know. Without some sort of a catalyst of an outside influence or of an encounter, or God forbid, something like what's happened here in this story, there's no way that they're going to change because they won't know that they need to.
I think in the hospital scene, David realizes that him and Ruth have not addressed Emily in the way that she should be as their daughter. They've spoken over her, and seeing how much she's deteriorated, it has had an effect on him. Because of the way they would have reacted back home, though, to her breakdown, this is another thing that reinforces that, her parents might judge her if she tells them what happened to her. And so in that way, she closes off even more.
He was just a friend, Dad. Yeah. He didn't do anything. It was my fault. He just scared me.
She is scared of telling the doctor because she's scared that the doctor will tell her parents. And obviously she doesn't want it to come out this way. If she's going to tell her parents, she wants to tell them straight up herself. Because in this situation, it would be even more embarrassing and shameful if the doctor had to come forward and say it for her.
Well, we've taken a blood sample and we're just running some more tests. We haven't got anything conclusive yet, but we'll call you as soon as we've got the results and let you know.
And that's where the story initially ended. It was left very open-ended, as it wasn't very clear how much parental or friend support she would receive. After spending time on more drafts of the screenplay, I realised that we needed to have an ending that was more optimistic. It was also a matter of messaging. It was a question of, what do we want the audience to come away with? Do you want to convey a message of hopelessness, or make a clear demonstration of the kind of elements that a person going through trauma needs in order to build up that strength to speak out?
It was a really important aspect of humanizing Ruth. And not just for the audience sake, but for Emily as well. I think as children, we're brought up to believe that our parents are some sort of superhuman or otherworldly, like infallible creature. A lot of times parents encourage that notion. Oh, I'm never wrong, because I'm your parent, because I said so, because I am the law, or this is my word is gold, kind of a thing. And I am firmly against that methodology of raising children. I think that teaching your children that you're infallible not only dehumanizes you to them, but it also stunts their empathy, I think. It makes them feel less than for having emotions that you refuse to show. And I think that Ruth giving this diary, this like key to her past to her daughter, is her way of starting to show her like, hey, actually, I'm a human being too. And here are some of my fuck ups. And you're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. I'm here for you. And it creates a connection that was never there before. This bond of seeing each other as people.
He's 25 and he doesn't see me as just a schoolgirl. He asked if I would marry him, and he's always saying he doesn't know what to do without me. It's so adorable, and I know he doesn't talk to the others like he talks to me. I can never trust you again, Mum. I got it back out of the trash. And if you're reading this again, it is none of your fucking business. I had sex with all of those boys. They felt good, and I felt good, and I did it because I wanted it. And I knew you would hate it. But that at least proves that you do care about me, even if it's only because I'm a slut. I swear to God, if I ever have kids, I will never treat them like this. Like they're a burden. Like they're just here to serve me. Like they only matter if they're doing something I don't like and I want to punish them for it. I will nurture and love them, and I will make sure that they have all the things you have never given me. Support and love and opportunity, no matter what. I swear I will never be like you.
All of these other times, Ruth has tried to talk and weave her words to make Emily think certain ways. But in this moment, she just allows Emily to exist with this diary. And when Emily is ready to open up about the experience and to talk about her mother's experiences, Ruth is just downstairs waiting for her.
I believe that one of the greatest things that a parent can give to their child is humility. And the reason for that is that you're showing your child that you're still growing and learning how to be a better person. And a key part of it is that you're acknowledging that there are alternative views and that life does contain imperfections and issues and problems along the way. But that isn't the only part of it. Emily seeing the humility of her mother is a huge step towards her navigating the trauma that she's endured and overcoming her fear of judgment and ultimately being able to move forward with her life.
If you can look back on your own work and critique it, like honestly critique it and say, I can do this much better, or I can do this much better, it's obvious that you've grown.
It was fun while it lasted, you know? Being part of this ambitious, if slightly mismanaged project.
The project that you had in mind would have been absolutely feasible to finish in Source Filmmaker. Really, it did just frankly need more people. A few more animators, a couple more guys doing models and maps, and producer to organize stuff. I do think it would have been a feasible project, and I would have liked to keep working on it because it was fun. It was really fun, and you know, like seeing the final stuff. It was really satisfying to render a shot.
I didn't expect the audition to lead to a multi-year-long friendship with multiple people who genuinely have impacted my life in very real ways. You know, I wouldn't have met Ali without it, and I love Ali to bits as well. It's had a really great effect on my life. I love that there is somebody who wants to tell a story like this.
I would change some things. I think so much of what undermined the project was that I didn't really have a real grasp of who the audience for the film was. I felt, of course, at the start that it was for the survivors of these kinds of traumatic experiences. But at the same time, I wanted to show unblinkingly that kind of traumatic experience. And I held on to my anger for so long and justified it for so long that I didn't realize how much I was pushing away survivors. And looking back on it now, I wouldn't do it the same way. you know, none of the scenes of violence were necessary to communicate the real heart of the story. And I'm just really sad that it's taken this long for me to acknowledge that, and for me to have lost so many friends and connections because I held on to that anger. And I just hope that the message comes through that I never intended for it to come out so wrong, because it was never the message of the story. The message was one that I hoped was about healing and growing through solidarity, but I pushed solidarity away myself. And I regret that. Not only because I lost so many people I valued and connections with people, but because I know I can do better than that. I know that I can be a better person than that. And I'm still trying to figure out how to do those things.
Even if it might not be a final project, or if it takes forever to make it a final product as a film, I think it is an incredible story to tell and to show how sexual assault can impact victims and how they deal with such trauma.
There's a lot to be said for projects like this, so I'm just glad it existed. In whatever capacity it ends up being, I'm really grateful that I got to be part of it.
I'm sorry, Mom. I was at that party. I went with Callie. Ben didn't go. It wasn't him. I shouldn't have been there. I was at the party and someone hurt me. I was stupid. I thought he was my friend, but he grabbed me. He made me do things. Someone hurt me when I was out that night. There was this guy there. He made me sleep with him and someone else. I thought they wanted to show me something. I didn't want them to touch me. They made me do sex stuff and I didn't want to. I never wanted anything, but they wouldn't let me go. I didn't want it. I said no. I don't understand what happened. They raped me.